Hello again, and welcome to this week's edition of The Bleed, Bleeding Cool's book club. Sorry we are coming at you one day later. We had a few technical difficulties, but we are coming through. We're persevering, even through sickness. I apologize if my voice sounds a little weird because I'm fighting my 1-year-old's virus. So, fun stuff, but enough about me being a giant baby. We are here to talk comics. And this week we have a few wonderful guests with us. Right now we're going to be talking COPRA by Michel Fiffe. The first 6 issues just came out through Bergen Street Comics. And we have one of Bergen Street's own, or formerly of Bergen Street and now of Nobrow. We have Tucker Stone with us. Hi, Tucker.
Hey man, how's it going? I'm
Doing
sorry. I'm
well.
sorry you don't feel well. Should have a talk with that kid of yours.
I know. I'm going to give him a stern lecture about germs. Hopefully he understands. And also joining us, we have Matt Kindt, cartoonist of Mind MGMT and writer of quite a few Valiant titles, and all-around comics extraordinaire. How are you doing, Matt?
Pretty good. Healthy as an ox.
I envy you. And then also with us is Sam. Sam, you want to say something to us? Let us know you're breathing.
Yes, I am breathing and doing well. Thank you for asking.
Of course. Well, before we get started in talking about COPRA, I wanted to go and ask everyone. A quick question about why we're here, and that's comic books. So I wanted to ask you why exactly do you love comics? I'm gonna kick it over to Tucker first.
Why do I love comics? I don't know, man. It's kind of a tough one. I just think I've always really loved reading, and just kind of cottoned on to comics, I guess, a little later than most people do. I didn't read them when I was really young. Read them when I was like a young teen, around the age of 13, maybe even 12. I think I read some Justice League comics. I just like that form of storytelling. I think it's got a lot of potential to it. I think it's really interesting to me when it does stuff that it's kind of outside the general, things you can get out of other mediums like television, film, and traditional prose. I just really love the that kind of stuff. I also like the fact that, like, with a comic, it's similar in terms to like a novel or something, where it's a chance to kind of have a one-to-one relationship with an artist, whereas so much else I find, especially in those kind of forms of entertainment, that kind of genre entertainment specifically, is often mediated by just a cabal of people, a whole list of writers and directors and actors and editors and producers and all that stuff. Whereas with there's quite a few comics out there where I can just have a one-to-one relationship with one specific artist and them kind of delivering a certain kind of story, delivering a certain kind of experience. And it's something I found when it really hits, it's really something special. I also think I just kind of like it from a masochistic standpoint because there are so few comics that are any good. And so it's a fun one to go to and be like, okay, so I'd probably be better off just marathon binge watching television, but I'm gonna find a lot. I kind of like those moments when you find those hidden gems in the comics.
Yeah.
That's my answer. I'm gonna stick to that for right now. It might change tomorrow.
It's a good answer. I'll stick with it. And what about you, Matt? How do you love comics?
Yeah, I agree with that answer, really. No, I started when I was young. My brother was older than me, and I was probably reading comics when I was like 6 and 7. Reading, like, I just caught on to like when Phoenix died the first time. I just started reading after that happened, and after Elektra died, I was reading just after that, so I missed all of like the important deaths of characters, and was picking up the stuff after that. But I was reading it when I was a kid, and I remember going on like family vacations, and my brother and I were just like crazy about comics. We would pest our parents to like find a comic shop, wherever we were. I remember we went to Washington D.C. and it's like, man, we would look in the yellow pages and try to find the comic book shop and figure out if it was close enough or on the way to somewhere, and try to convince my parents to go on the way to whatever, Washington Monument. Let's hit the comic shop on the way there. and then I distinctly remember like 2 or 3 times we get to the shop, we'd finally convince them, and we get there, and it would be closed because they didn't open until noon. Comic shops don't open until noon. This is back in like 1980 or whatever, and so we would just be frustrated. But so I mean, my love of comics is born from me as a kid loving them. And I like to read everything. I read a ton of science fiction, but I read a lot of like pulp stuff, like Doc Savage, and the comics just sort of fit into that. It was all of those things put together. Then when I got older, by the time I got to college, I sort of outgrew the comics I was reading and was like, man, I've kind of lost interest in it, but I still like to write and draw. And then I discovered like 8-Ball, like the second or third issue of 8-Ball had come out, so I bought 3 issues of that at a convention in Chicago, and then I remember driving home from there and reading those in the car, and I was like, oh, this is I can still read comics. I still like comics. It's just I wasn't reading the comics I needed at the time, and so then that got me back into comics, and I started reading more, more independent stuff and some underground junk, and then by the time I got out of college, I was like, comics is what I want to do. There's a lot of people telling stories that aren't just superheroes. You could tell any kind of story, and I was in love with the medium, and I like to write a lot. I like to draw a lot. I couldn't really. I didn't want to go in either direction. I wanted to go in both directions, and so comics was like the only way I could figure out to do that. And like he said, it's the one medium where it's one voice talking. And it's especially great if you can write and draw your own thing, because then it literally is just you. Everything on the page is what you did, and it's your vision and your story and what you want, and it's really the only medium you can kind of do that in and get it in front of people.
Cool. Well, Tucker, how did you get involved in working in comics?
Working in comics, I'll try to rush through it because it's too long and not interesting. I mean, I think it's interesting, but I don't think anybody else will find it interesting. But let's see. I came up in Georgia, and I never met anybody who read comics. I wasn't like hiding it, and I don't have some backstory of like getting picked on in high school or anything. Like, I just never knew anybody who read a comic book. I never met anybody who read a comic. And so it wasn't until I moved to New York and I started kind of like, kind of discovering these like kind of more alternative focused stores and like this subculture that was like growing up online and stuff like that, where I started like relating to people, like actually talking about things like Acme Novelty Library or something like that, actually relating to people about that stuff. So I came up as, I wrote for my blog, and then I got hired to write for a couple of websites, Comixology specifically, and that I wrote for Comixology every week back when they didn't have like an app and stuff like that, until and I did that stuff you have to do, like cover conventions and that kind of thing, and interview people and all that kind of stuff, and then I took a job working as just a clerk at Bergen Street Comics right after it opened. And then after a while, I became the manager, and then a few years ago, I became a partner in the store, and it's just kind of gone off from there. I freelanced for a lot of companies. I worked with Image one time, but I worked with Nobrow a lot. Worked with a lot of other publishers, but specifically Nobrow. And then then Nobrow and I went on full time with them last year when we opened a U.S. office. And around the same time as that was happening, Tom Adams, who's my partner at Bergen Street Comics, and I started publishing these like little reprints of Fiffe's COPRA comics. And then when it came time, actually what happened with COPRA, I kind of jump ahead just to tell you this stuff now, it's like we were in these little 3-issue collections, but it became like super non-profitable to the point where like the third time we did it, we lost a whole bunch of money and really screwed up. And also failed to meet anywhere near the demand. And so we went back to the drawing board, and that's how we came up with this book, this collection that we've just recently published. And that's when we made it like an official company where it has like a name and there's taxes and stuff like that and all that kind of crap. But so that's where I'm at now. I mean, obviously for me, it keeps transitioning. Like I never intended to be somebody who writes about comics, and then I never intended to work at a comic book store. And it just keeps kind of changing. So I don't know where I mean, I like working for Nobrow, though. That's a fun job, so I'll probably stick to that for a while. It's nice to travel around the country and go to conventions. I'm not bored with that yet.
It's always fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. And Matt, how did you get your big break?
Yeah, when I got out of college, I just wrote and drew my graphic novel. I wrote Pistol Whip, and just put it all together and mocked it up. Had Kinko's make like 20 of them, along with my partner at the time, Jason Hall, and we just went to San Diego. This is back in 2000, and handed it out to publishers, editors. Introduced myself, and just I was like, handed them my book, and I was like, here's my book. It's like nobody knew who I was, and at the time, San Diego wasn't as crazy, so it was a little bit easier to do that, and I gave it to everybody, like Fantagraphics and Top Shelf and Slave Labor and Dark Horse, and I had a cover letter, and I had like a little fake cigarette in there that had our website on there, and you puff on it, and like a little powder came out like a real cigarette, and to go along with like the detective thing, and a bunch of tiny little like tobacco trading cards and stuff, just a bunch of junk, just something to try to stand out, and be like, please look at this, don't throw it in the trash at the hotel room on your way home. And then like a week later, I got a call from Top Shelf, and they wanted to publish the book, as is. They didn't have there was no notes or anything. They just liked the book a lot, and that was it, And I did a bunch of books with them, and then sort of moved on, did some books with Dark Horse, and just been working ever since.
So, other than Mind Management, what are you working on right now?
I'm launching a new creator-owned book with Scott Collins that starts in March called Pastaways, which is like science fiction that I'm just writing and he's drawing. I'm doing like 5 books for Valiant. I'm writing. So I'm launching like Ninjak in the spring, and I'm doing a book that I'm co-writing with Jeff Lemire called The Valiant that Paulo Rivera is drawing, and then I'm doing Rye, which is like an ongoing series, and then Unity, and I'm probably forgetting one in there.
I remember. I think there was one that they announced. I think it was called Divinity, and I was really interested in hearing you talk about that, just because the concept seemed a little intriguing.
Yeah, I knew I was forgetting one. Yeah, Divinity. It was a story. It was a story that I was going to do in Unity, and so I came up with a character who's sort of like this 60s cosmonaut who goes into space, and then he comes back, and something really weird happened to him, and then he has all these. He's crazy powerful, but he's also crazy, and so it was going to be an arc in Unity. And then when I pitched the story to Valiant, and Warren, my editor, he liked it. He came back and he's like, well, what if we just did this as a limited series? Make this character a character and give him his own space and make it, give him sort of his own story. And I was like, sure, So it was just one of those things that started out as one thing, and then they liked it enough that they thought it could be its own story, which is kind of nice. It gives me a little more space to play and focus on this new character, and I don't, instead of like trying to fold it into like a teen book or anything.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Now, as someone who's they write and draw their own stuff, but then you write for artists like Paulo Rivera, and you write for artists like Doug Braithwaite and so many other awesome names. What do you enjoy doing most?
I enjoy watching their pages come in my email. It's kind of awesome, first of all, it's great to just write a story and I don't have to draw it. There's a little bit of relief every time I turn a story in. And then, but yeah, when the art comes back, I'm just amazed, It's like, it makes me want to draw better and do a better job. And it's just fun, There's like a weird thrill that I can't describe, and I don't know how else you would get it, from writing something and picturing it in your head and then having someone else just like bring it to life is sort of a weird process, and it's awesome. When the art turns out great, it's amazing,
Awesome. Tucker, what about you? What are you working on right now?
What am I working on?
Yeah, is there a book from Nobrow coming out that you're specifically working on, or?
Oh yeah, well, we're in the finishing up. We're got Jamie Coe's book, Art Schooled, debuts. It's his debut book. It's a graphic novel. Comes out first week in November, and that's that's like your traditional kind of alt comics thing. It's a kid going off to art school from rural England to London. So there's a lot of smoking weed and trying to hook up with girls who are way out of your league, and making terrible paintings and stuff like that. It's really funny. The kid can draw really, really well. He'd done a couple of mini comics before that, but his work is really, really strong. And then the other one is this book called Robert Moses, which is a graphic biography. Nobrow started to do a lot of nonfiction stuff, and it's a dramatist guy, Olivier Belez, who has very much like a very Darwin Cookie kind of style, like very, that kind of like 50s, 60s illustration style. Mm-hmm. And it's written by a guy named Pierre Christin, who I'm probably massacring his name. Pierre Christin is for me like a huge deal because he wrote Black Order Brigade. He worked with Inky Bilal on Black Order Brigade, and Chaos Effect, another book that collects Black Order Brigade, and another one. But his work with Bilal, I think, is just some of the most incredible, just sci-fi, political, nasty comics like you'll ever read. I think that guy's really, really good. And he just was really interested in telling the story of Robert Moses, the guy who, one of the most influential, probably the most influential urban planner in the history of the world, like the guy who designed New York City, and he had so much power, that he didn't have to make friends, if he wanted to build an overpass through your household, then he did that. That's exactly what he did. And it's a pretty fascinating kind of story to tell because, it won there's a book called The Power Broker that won the Pulitzer, and it's a really influential biography. And so that's kind of always made people kind of shy away from telling the story of Robert Moses. So these guys, because they're not Americans, they don't give a shit. They'll take on anything. They're able to take it and do it as a graphic novel, which is kind of an interesting take because a graphic novel can actually represent what the job of an urban planner is and the kind of rise of a city in a way that is going to make it more difficult for prose. And it's kind of a perfect fit, and it's a really, it's just a fun book to kind of send out to people and talk to people about, because even though graphic biographies are becoming more and more popular, it's still a genre that doesn't particularly have a lot of really, there's not too many like Asterios Polyp type graphic biographies out there. There's some really good ones, but this is one that I think has a real potential to kind of give that particular subgenre a little more respect, because it really is the type of thing that can, because it's a comic, it can do something visually that a traditional narrative is going to be just incapable of doing, or is going to be very difficult to do. But yeah, that, and then of course also we're pulling the trigger, I think I just got the contracts to print COPRA Round 2 this morning, and so we're setting up to do that, and next week is when the official orders from previews come in for Round 1, which is the first time any of Fiffe's self-published stuff has been available through previews, despite the fact that thanks to that dude Matt Fraction did some interview with previews last year where he's like, my favorite comic is COPRA. And that's kind of how we got it in previews, because previews, obviously, the way previews works is they don't want to talk to you if you're a self-published thing or a new company. They just want to hang up. They can't hang up the phone fast enough. But when you're able to say you guys have already talked about COPRA, Matt Fraction, Mr. Sex Criminals, he showed up and he said that we're the best. So now we're here. You want some of this money, you want some of this sweet Michel Fiffe money. Well, let's get to talking. So next week is when we find out. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit nervous, excited, because next week is when we find out. I don't know if I did my job right. If this actually is going to sell to people outside of, I know I've got that Chris Sims money now. Every time, I love that guy, and every time that dude goes on Comics Alliance and says, "Hey man, you should read COPRA," there's 20 emails from the little website that does our distribution. But I don't know if I've reached outside the Chris Sims fan base yet. So next week is when I find out.
Well, one of our friends, Chase Magnet, he loves COPRA, and he wrote a really nice review about it for comicbook.com.
Oh yeah, no, I read that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's
you can't breathe about COPRA online and not have me basically going to your house and writing you postcards. I'm stalking you. Yeah, I'll find out. I care more about people who write about COPRA than I do my own family.
Well, this is a great segue, man, because I was so excited to read this book. This is one of the last books that we're gonna do where we are the picks, and now pretty much all of our guests from now on, we want them to choose the books. But I
Hmm.
had to squeeze this in here because I missed the bandwagon when it first started coming out. But I've been getting all the from since issue 13. I've been ordering them from Etsy,
Hmm.
and when I heard that the first collection was coming out, oh man, I lost my shit. I was so excited that I finally get to see the beginning of this crazy story because flipping through it, it's so fun and there's so much going on. There's so much life on all these pages. I was so excited. And I know I was hyping it up to Sam. So I'm really wondering what Sam thought of it after finally reading. So, what are your initial thoughts about the first 6 issues of COPRA, Sam?
Well, I definitely loved it. I remember my local comic book shop, Mission Comics. I remember they had it on the little front display on the main checkout area. And when I first saw the art, I mean, a lot of times I think like a lot of people, unless there's a recognizable name, the art will draw somebody into a book. So that was the first thing I saw, and I knew I kind of wanted to pick it up and read it. And then when I started to read it, it had this kind of the Suicide Squad Dirty Dozen feel to it that I love, with mixed with the sci-fi. I'm a big sci-fi fan as well, so it really really excited me. And in addition, I really love the character design. A lot of it reminding me of Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol to a degree. Some of the villains there, the guy who's like black and white, and I forget his name, but like a triangle, and Doom Patrol is one of my favorites. So, when I first picked it up, it caught my eye right away. The story was great, and I also think there was like the presentation, how it's printed on kind of that thicker paper, was really well done as well. It all around just kind of blew it out of the water for me. So reading all six, I think like a lot of comics, like if you don't have to wait and you can just kind of flip the pages like you get to do with a Netflix show. It changed the experience, and in this case, I thought it made it awesome. I really 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 enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a lot easier to get through these 6 issues than pretty much any other trade or graphic novel I've read in a very long time. Just because of how it never stops. It never lets you take a breath. It just is constantly moving forward and pushing the stakes forward. And those are, I think, the best action stories where you never really know where it's going to end up. And Matt, well, how familiar were you with COPRA before this meeting?
Not at all. I looked it up before today just so I would know what we were talking about. And then, like, I'm the most out of touch. Honestly, I can tell you, it's like, I don't know. Everyone asks me, like, what comics are you reading that you like now? And I'm like, man, I'm so busy working, which sounds like a cop-out, but I'm so busy doing comics that I don't really have time to read them. And when I do have time to read, I'm reading prose or some nonfiction something. So it's like my reading is so limited that every once in a while somebody will be like, hey, read this, and if I happen to stumble across it at the store, I'll pick it up because I heard about it. And so yeah, it looks like it's right up my alley. So I guess I'll be picking it up after this.
Yeah, you definitely have to. It's a fun book. It's got a lot going on. The it's just a classic throwback to pretty much all those awesome Suicide Squad stories from John Ostrander. And so, Tucker, I wanted to ask you what drew you in about this comic when you first started talking to Michel about it, and when you got your hands on it the first time.
Uh, what drew me in? Well, I mean, what drew me in? I've been in touch with Fiffe for. See, I've known his comics since Zegas, when Zegas was like just an Activate comic online. And then when he first started doing single issues, he and I were working together at Bergen Street because he would work there one day a week. And I was telling you guys before, like on Tuesdays when we were like checking in the diamond order, Fiffe and I would work that whole day together, and so we would just always be talking about comics, and he'd always, tell me what he was doing. He'd bring in stuff that he was making, and so when he was making Zegas, like I was reading every issue of that. And I don't know, have you guys seen that comic at all?
I've looked it up because I just got the email that he is doing more reprints of it, and so I'm very curious about getting it.
Yeah, Zegas is it's like it's very limited. And it was this comic that he was doing that was kind of his love and rockets in a lot of ways. But not in the sense that like it was just kind of it was an oversized comic on that heavy stock paper, telling just the kind of short narrative stories that he wanted to tell. Some of them based in a reality, some of them based in kind of a loose sci-fi future, but still kind of based in like relationships and that sort of thing. And it's just amazing, like the work that he would do in there visually and everything. And but at the same time, I knew it wasn't. He was able to sell it to the people who wanted to buy it, but he wasn't able to kind of move it beyond that. And so he decided to go a different way, and he did Death Zone. And Fiffe and I are both super fans of that John Ostrander Suicide Squad run, the original stuff. Luke McDonnell. We're
Kim,
both
yeah.
really, all that stuff. The Keith Giffen issue of Justice League International. That's like a tie-in issue with that. Like all that stuff, we're just really, really big fans of. Really big fans of the Deadshot miniseries. And so he decided to do a bootleg Suicide Squad comic set in that John Ostrander universe. And he asked me to write this little. He was showing me pages, and he asked me to write an essay about Suicide Squad for it. And he did that and self-published it. And then to get around the legalities of selling it to people, selling something to him that was obviously owned by DC Comics, he just sold like little drawings. And then if you bought a drawing, you could get a Suicide Squad pamphlet that came free with the drawing. And which doesn't actually work. That's not still totally illegal. But anyway, so there's like 300 copies of that lurking around out there, and they're amazing. And I have like the original art on my wall. It's an incredible comic. After that, that's when he came up with the idea for COPRA, to tell stories in this kind of vein. And I was just kind of fascinated by the idea, because initially what he said was, I want to do a comic that I'm writing, that I'm drawing, that I'm coloring, and I want to do it in a month. And I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to self-publish it. I'm going to sell it on Etsy. I'm going to figure out the numbers so that if I sell out, I'm going to aim to sell out, and if I sell out, I can pay my rent. So I'm going to be a guy who makes comics his own way once a month, and I got to pay my rent off those comics. And then he did that. When you're looking at COPRA Round 1, that's 6 months of work. When you're looking at COPRA Round 2, that's 6 months of work. When you're looking at 6 issues of COPRA, that's what you're holding in your hands, is a comic that he is, regardless if he's on a trip, he's writing it on the plane, and he's drawing it on the plane, like he's doing all that shit. And so at the beginning, it was like, can he pull this off? And to be honest, man, I mean, the guy was my friend, so I was like, it was kind of an ancillary benefit whether or not I was going to even enjoy reading it. It was mainly like, can this guy meet this challenge? Because who meets that challenge anymore, I mean, obviously, Matt, you do that with mind management, so.
I didn't want to say it, but yeah.
Yeah, good job.
Well,
But,
for a bit of insight, Matt, how hard is it to write, draw, color it, package it like that? I mean, obviously, you have you get quite a bit of help, I'm sure, from Dark Horse, but even then, you're doing pretty much all the work. How difficult is that to do that month in and month out?
It's tough, I can tell you. I mean, I guess I'm on issue 28, so I've been doing this for 28 months. And I think after a while, like after the shock of like how much work it is, you just sort of like lull yourself into like, this is my workload, these are the hours I have to do every month. And then you just do it, and then you just find a way to do it, and it becomes easier. I think the more you do it, it becomes easier. But yeah, I mean, I basically just turn in a finished comic to Dark Horse, like the production's done and everything, and they do a good job of like marketing it and making sure it gets out there. But yeah, I think it just gets easier. You get into a rhythm of it, and then I think it forces you to sort of refine your process. Like, I don't know how he works, but it's like over the course of these 2 years, I've definitely refined my process to the point where I know, like, it's streamlined. There is not a wasted minute, in my schedule, unless I'm surfing something online, But the actual like drawing and everything, I figured out my process and how to do it best, and it's like, rule all the pages first, then pencil everything, and then ink everything, and then ink in a certain way where I'm only doing like the thick lines, and then go through and do the thin lines, and so just little stuff like that, little tricks that make it easier, and at least psychologically it makes it like easier to get through a month.
Would you be able to write and draw more than one comic at the same time? If you, and I know you do Mind Management, and you do writing on others, but would you be able to do that? I mean, how does that break down when you have obviously more than one book to do?
Yeah, I mean, I could. It is physically possible that I could write and draw. I could do 2 Mind Management style comics a month. I would have to not do anything else, you know. And then the problem with that is, like, you know, after penciling a whole issue, I'm burned out on pencils. After inking a whole issue, I'm kind of burned out on inking. So it's nice to just be able to, like, take a week off and write something, you know, and then go back to the art chores and stuff. So it's possible. I just don't. I think mentally, I think it would be too much. It would be too hard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I wanted to go back to COPRA and ask Tucker real quick. What you were kind of talking about how it compares to those old Suicide Squad comics. How do you think that this comic stacks up to things from modern, more modern superhero comics that are coming out, like the newer Suicide Squad stuff and other comics like that?
I think, I mean, well, I mean, ultimately, I think, like, you know, you have DC Comics that are going to be producing a lot of, like, hardcore kind of, not really gore fest, but they're built around some sort of kind of constant screaming match kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Also mixed with this really, like, kind of really, I think, basic, like, really prosaic dining room kind of drama, like the sort of thing that if you're watching on television you would stop paying attention to, you know, where, like, superheroes don't wear their costumes and they stand there and refer to each other by their first name and they talk about, like, some type of emotional disturbance that they had recently, like, but in really, like, short, abbreviated tones.
A little bit of a soap opera.
Yeah, I mean, but a soap opera that, like, you wouldn't watch because nobody actually has sex or there's no, like, forward momentum in a relationship. It's just kind of people kind of repeating their names a lot and repeating, like, their really, like, immediate circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And then with Marvel Comics, I think it's a little more different. I think Marvel has a tendency to kind of allow its people to kind of pursue their own voices. So, and I mean, like a Jason Aaron Marvel comic doesn't really read the same way like a, you know, an Ed Brubaker comic read or a Matt Fraction comic read, in the same way that, like, a DC comic, they kind of all tend to read pretty much the same. But I think with COPRA, it just kind of, it's a more of an, because it's kind of, its bloodline comes from 80s DC comics, which were kind of based in, like, this is your own separate little fiefdom, go off and do your thing over here, you know, this is, go off and make your comic. And it's not gonna. Maybe it'll bump into another comic, but you didn't read a John Ostrander Suicide Squad and think you were reading a Keith Giffen Justice League International. Like, there were clear, distinct lines, and that I think kind of is a testament to having an individual voice. And I think mixing that the way Fiffe does with, like, his love of classic Punisher stuff, as well as Steve Ditko's work on Shade the Changing Man, and just basically Steve Ditko's Mr. A work and that sort of thing. Like, I think when you have that many, like, really distinct voices mixed in, you end up having something that has its own, it's able to rise above its influences to some degree. It also has to do everything within its tiny little universe. Like, it has to do everything within these pages. It's not going to be able to count on any kind of excitement that you bring to it because you've known these characters for years. It's not going to be able to. I mean, there is a nostalgia factor that people are going to apply with specifically Deadshot, I think, because he's the most close to his kind of original version, him and Captain Boomerang maybe. But you're not going to be able to rely on somebody going, like, when I was 12 years old, COPRA was the first comic I read, and I got an erection, and I always relate all my stories of COPRA to that first time, blah, 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 blah. Like, I've had that same, you know, my Batman relationship goes back to when I was a kid, so obviously when I read a Batman comic, it's not with a clean, objective viewpoint. It's with it comparing and contrasting to those memories. You know, it's difficult. I mean, I have a financial interest in COPRA being awesome, but I think COPRA is awesome. I think it is better than the kind of traditional superhero comics that are coming out right now. I think it's, you know, I don't think there's a lot of comics out there that are written and drawn by one person, and when they are, they don't stick around for very long. So yeah, I find those things to be more exciting than the traditional fare that comes out from DC and Marvel.
Yeah, I tell you, this the last few years and the books that are coming out from Matt, from his buddy Jeff Lemire, from Michel Fiffe, it's just it's a breath of fresh air. It's a you kind of get you get the different taste that you don't normally get from even from a lot of these people's creative owned stuff, because it's just the work is so personal to them all. I think one of my first writer artist graphic novels that I really kind of fell in love with and just gave to everyone that I knew was uh, Jeff Lemire's Lost Dogs, and it was just such a poignant story that like was such a gut punch, and it really kind of opened my eyes to the different independent comics. Because I mean, before I would read anything like Image and a lot of Dark Horse stuff, and but it it still kind of all felt like different flavors of the same brand, and that was one of the books that really opened my eyes. And so if it weren't for that, I wouldn't even be open to a book like COPRA. And it's so refreshing to see a, a superhero comic that doesn't dumb down. It doesn't play to tropes. Well, I mean, it does. It plays to, but the characters are so well defined, and the designs, just like Sam said, the characters are so the the colors that they uses for each of them, their personalities that are just that come out in their designs, and then the way that they talk. Everyone is just so fully realized, and like nothing is left out in the story. And the panels, man, the layouts. Jesus, this comic has some of the most beautiful layouts I've seen, with the giant brain blasting her hairdresser and like turning his brains to goo. I mean, like just that page itself is just how
Oh yeah,
simple
the
it
fight.
is.
I mean, the fight sequences in this are insane.
Oh
Like when
man.
when she's ripping the wheelchair assassin out by his very much like by the mechanics that hold him in there. Like there's weight to these people when they go down on the ground. When they in the Japanese issue when they're jumping across those rooftops and chasing each other around, like you can see everything that's happening on the page. Like your eye knows how to read this stuff instinctually, and it's like and it's easy to forget when something is that seamless, like how much design sense has to come into play to make that happen. I mean,
Oh
these things read so quickly.
yeah, I was very surprised by how quickly I blew through it, but then going back over it, it's like holy shit, the detail, the staging in it. He's mapped out everything perfectly, and your eye goes through it so quickly, so seamlessly. I mean, even if you weren't trained to read a comic book and you had no idea how to go left or right and follow the panels, you would you would have no trouble getting through the action in this book. You wouldn't be lost. It's just it's very well choreographed, very well framed. He's got a very cinematic eye, and I'm very interested to see what he does in the future. So, uh, I guess we can kind of bring it back around. Let's let's wrap this up. The talk about Copra. I want to ask you what your guys' favorite parts were. Sam, what was your favorite part in this comic?
I really liked I really liked the whole thing, but the first scene where they're going in the truck and they're attacked by that other mysterious band of assassins or special ops people. One because and this is something we've talked about before, Joe, that Rick Remender does really well, but like in both cases you get so many characters introduced, you start to build this little bond with them, and there's some emotional connection, and then bam, the writer goes off and just kind of kills them off. So I think it's exciting that he does a good job of getting you emotionally invested right away. And I think that just seems cool. I knew right away once they had that skull with like the purple lightning bolt going through it that this was going to be up my alley, because it was just the right tinge of weird with a cool bit of action and an emotional connection. So that was probably my favorite scene. The first scene, to be honest, it was really really great.
Yeah, and Tucker, what's your favorite part about this book? These first 6 issues.
In the first 6 issues, my favorite part is the final battle. When I mean, you know how it ends, but when they go down the elevator shaft and they're bouncing off the sides, and then he just lands them at the bottom, and that callback to his childhood as he's just pummeling. Like, I think it's a real common trick I mean, I don't know who first did it, but it's a real common trick nowadays to do that, like panel repetition.
Hmm.
But the way that it's done here, I just think it's just supremely effective. And it's just, I mean, it's not a true panel repetition because it is, you're watching somebody beat somebody to death. But the little bit of change in each one of those things, and then for it to transition to that flashback to him as a child. I just think it's just a really well choreographed scene, and I think kind of what Sam said too. It's one of those things like it's coming, like you read enough of these comics. There's not many tricks that are left beyond like killing somebody that you care about, surprise killing somebody you care about, killing their girlfriend. Like there's the list is pretty short of things they're gonna do in these kind of comics, but I mean, it's a fucking tool, and when it's done effectively, like it's done here, I think it's incredibly emotional. I think it's really, really affecting, and also I just think it's a great conclusion to like an arc, even though there's obviously there's more story to tell. There's more to go on after this one.
Yeah, I agree. I'm like when we were talking about when he referenced Rick Remender, there are times where I kind of feel like he does that well, and then I kind of feel like there are times where he kind of takes advantage of you, and just because you've been reading an X-Men comic for 10 years, it's kind of it's something that he just throws at you, and it can be used cheaply. With these characters though, he makes you care about them right away. He has such distinct voices, and he puts it, he throws them together in such humorous fashion, and his artwork is so spot on for the emotions that these characters are going through, that it's just a really well done comic. And so, like when he does pull out those things, it doesn't seem like ham-fisted or cheap. He's earned it, and he's putting you through the ringer with him. I gotta say, my favorite part is the issue with Rax, where they're fighting the golem from that weird dimension, and there's just one panel. It's so ridiculous, like where I forgot what the lady in green, the girl who's in green, but when they're sneaking up on the the count, and this guard has a sucker in his mouth, but the lady just sneaks up on him, puts her hand over his mouth, and gives like a touch to his neck, like a knockout touch. But the way the sucker spits out of his mouth, and the way his lips kind of curl up and his eyes just immediately kind of bulge, it's just, I don't know. It's one
Yeah,
of
yeah.
those scenes that really makes you like, damn, you got to appreciate that. It's so well done. And yeah, just the scene with Rax. Rax ended up being one of my favorite characters, just because like just floating through the abyss and having no coherent thoughts, and slowly kind of gaining himself back once he bounces through the portal. It's just well done. It's fun comics. Matt, I can't wait for you to read it so you can
I know I was about to break
taste
in
it
and be
correct.
like, it's almost better hearing your guys' description of it with like the purple skulls and lightning. I hope it's as good as that sounds. It sounds
Oh
awesome.
man, that's one of the best parts. It's so batshit crazy. You just don't know where to go with it. It's so cool, and I think it's a testament to just the comic scene right now that there is an audience for that kind of stuff, and a guy can make a name for himself selling it on Etsy and turn in the right heads.
Yeah, I was gonna say that like as far as like the industry goes, I'm just breaking in here for a minute, but
Mhm.
the idea that people like me and him and like Jeff Lemire, that the climate in comics is so good that we can actually do well in the industry is just kind of amazing. You know, like if I think about what it was like even when I first started, it was tough, and I don't think there was an audience for a lot of that. But now it's like it's amazing that people are just open to all kinds of crazy new stuff like this that 10 years ago even they wouldn't have been.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think also the fact that in you guys being in the comic industry would know more about me than this, but something like Image can be so successful now, and I know that I don't know if Michelle would work with them at some point, or I know you've done, I believe, a little bit of work with them, Matt, but that they allow for that creator-owned vision, whether that's via the art, the writing, everything to come through. I think is really a testament, and how successful they are, really a testament to the interesting place that the industry is in right now. It's exciting.
No, it is. I'm glad to be part of it.
And it's great that even the publishers that would, were that you would expect to kind of stick to the old ways, that they're kind of allowing these young writers and artists to flourish right now. I mean, I know all the horror stories about DC, but now they have Mark Doyle over there, and he's putting out books like Gotham Academy. That's for a whole different audience, and doing the Doc Martin Batgirl. It's really interesting to see that, and everything with Marvel, with Charles Soule writing a book about She-Hulk being a lawyer, and just all the interesting stuff that Matt Fraction shoves in Hawkeye, and Nick Spencer does for Superior Foes. And then it just even Valiant. I mean Valiant is, I think, some of the better superhero comics. It's because they let guys like James Asmus and Robert Venditti do what the hell they want with the books, and they end up turning out really great. So it's just a really interesting time to be a comics fan. Even I think the kind of creator-owned effect is trickling up to the big guys and making them, recognize that it's all about the creators and letting them do what they want. You're gonna get great stories. Well, so I guess we can wrap this up right now. I wanted to just go through and get some quick final thoughts, just about the discussion we've had in general, and to close it out. So Tucker, why don't we start with you?
Well, I just finished reading Caliban, Garth Ennis' sci-fi horror miniseries from Avatar, and it's a really terrible final issue, but I still would say I think people are sleeping on Caliban. There's a couple issues in there that are pretty sweet.
I definitely was sleeping on it, so I'll have to...
It's terribly... I mean, it looks terrible. It's a terribly drawn comic. It's horribly drawn comic. It barely makes any sense whatsoever. But there's some sequences in there that you're like, all right, Garth, this isn't B grade Garth. This is A grade Garth. Just the final issue makes no sense whatsoever. It's like if you're watching a movie and then all of a sudden, like 15 minutes before the movie ended, like your dad just turned it off and he was like, "Time to go outside." I don't know what's gonna happen, and he's like, "Doesn't matter. Time to go outside."
Time's up.
Done.
But yeah, that's my final thought. Buy COPRA. Buy it now.
Okay.
Where's the best place to buy it?
Yeah, you know what? That's a good question. It would be really awesome if you would go to your local comic book store before October 23rd, and you would say, "Hey guys, can you order me a copy of COPRA through the Diamond catalog?" That'd be really helpful to Fiffe. That'd be really helpful to me. I have a daughter. It'd be really helpful to her. I have a wife. It'd be really helpful to her. I have a business partner. It would be helpful to him. Or if you just don't want to wait, if you want to buy it directly, you can buy it right now through Bergen Street Comics' Big Cartel site, which is right online. You can buy it right there. Well, and I'll mail it out to myself.
I just ordered it while you were talking. I would have waited. I didn't know I was supposed to do it through.
Oh no! Look at that! Look at yeah! I just got an email. I received a payment from Now I've got Matt Kindt's home address. I'm going to this right now.
Matt, it looks like you ordered 100 copies. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure.
But yeah, however you want to order it. It would be great if you could order it through Diamond, but if you don't want to wait, I totally understand. You can order it however you want to order it.
Well, I got it through that Big Cartel site. I could not wait. I was so happy to get my hands on it. So, yeah, Matt, you got to let us know what you think about it when you get it. But I'm going to shift it over to you. You have any final thoughts? Anything you want to hype up, or any projects you want to hype up?
No. Hey, I will say another good comic, since we're talking about comics, and I've read very few this year, but one I really liked was called Ama, A-A-M-A. Have you heard of that one?
Oh yeah, from Self-Made Hero put that out. Yeah.
That was like my favorite book of last year, and I think the volume 2 is coming out in November, so that's a good one. I'll also buy my stuff, but buy that too.
I'm gonna check it out. AAMA.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm not sure how you say it, but it's good sci-fi. If you like science fiction and you like it weird, that qualifies.
That's the best kind of science fiction. The weird stuff.
Yes.
Okay, Sam, any closing thoughts you want to impart?
Just that COPRA, excellent, highly recommend it. Also, I want to say thank you to Tucker and Matt for joining us today. Buy their stuff, and really appreciated it.
Okay, well, that was the latest issue of The Bleed. I really want to thank Matt, just like Sam, and thank Tucker for joining us on this week's episode. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, hopefully we'll have you guys on again. We'll discuss something that you guys want to read. And yeah, we'll see you next time when we be talking Neurocomic with Doctors Matteo Farinella. Am I pronouncing it right? And Dr. Hannah Rose?
Yep,
Tucker
that
will
sounds
yell
good.
at me.
That's
Okay,
good.
yeah. All right, just making sure. Yeah, that'll be a change of pace next week. We're actually going to be having the creators of the comic we're going to be discussing, just because Neurocomic, like Tucker was saying, is one of those nonfiction books that Nobrow's doing, and yeah, we need them to teach us some stuff because this is a very interesting and very dense comic. So we'll see you next week on the regular day, Wednesday. Take care.